Before we get started, we just want to thank Old Republic Surety for sponsoring this episode of Let's Get Surety, as well as NASBP virtual seminars for the 5th year in a row. For more information on Old Republic Surety, visit www.orsurety.com. Now on to our show.
You're listening to Let's Get Surety. Let me hear your bonding talk with Kat Shamapande.
Hey everyone, it's Kat Shamapande. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Let's Get Surety. I've got with me today my co-host, Mark McCallum, CEO at NASBP. Hey, Mark.
Hi, Kat. It's always a delight.
It's always great to have you on with me. And today we've got an exciting topic. We're talking about cryptocurrency bonds. That's something you know a lot about, right, Mark?
Oh, absolutely.
Well, that's why we brought in today's guest. So today we have with us Stefan Engelhardt from Brown & Brown, and he's the Sales and Outreach Director there at Brown & Brown. Thanks for being on, Stefan.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to talk about the things that make me interested in being in Surety.
Well, to get us kicked off before we dive into cryptocurrency bonds, Stefan, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about Brown & Brown?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been in insurance for just under 10 years. I'd say I'm a pretty new in the space. You know, it's a decade's a decent amount of time, but pretty new comparative to a lot of my peers. And I've been mostly focused on commercial surety and just trying to sort of break down the walls of where surety bonds can be used in a global sector for commercial use. So, talking about cryptocurrency today, I know I've talked with you about things like healthcare before and just a lot of wacky stuff. And so it's just that gets me really interested in trying to develop surety for, brokers and underwriters and everybody. As far as Brown & Brown, very large, one of the largest insurances brokerages in the world. We provide risk management solutions through many different subsidiaries. And we offer our business segments are through insurance products for general businesses, corporations, government institutions, trade associations, basically everyone. And I'm happy to represent them.
So before we talk about this, I know some people hear the term cryptocurrency and they freak out a little bit. So would you just tell us, Stefan, how are you defining cryptocurrency?
Yeah, so it's so funny because everybody's heard of it at this point. I mean, you'd have to be a pretty far deep wallflower to not have heard the term cryptocurrency at this point, or even like NFTs, which are sort of the stepbrother of it. So cryptocurrency really is just, like a more official definition, because I have one in front of me, decentralized digital currency that uses cryptographic hash functions to secure and validate real transactions. What does that mean? Those are a lot of big words. I know what that means. I put it there just for the sake of having it. But really what it is non-fiat, which fiat being like real paper money established through a government, right? The US government or any country. So it's non-fiat, so it's not backed by any sort of government, and it's just a digital currency. So there's no regulating authority, there's no banks to verify transaction, and what they use is a public ledger. And everybody's heard probably the term blockchain as well, which is very synonymous with cryptocurrency. Obviously, blockchain has many other uses outside of it's more of a security thing and less of a cryptocurrency thing. It's actually entirely a security thing. But this public ledger essentially uses blockchain technology to encrypt and verify transactions. That's sort of the long and short of it. So yeah, when we're talking about cryptocurrency today, we're really just talking about digital money transmitting, if the same way I would try to send money to you through an ACH or something, a wire transfer, you can do that with Bitcoin or Litecoin or Dogecoin or any of these meme coins nowadays that have some silly picture associated with them. So that's all we're really talking about, and how that relates to surety, obviously.
So what type of bonds are there in the cryptocurrency space?
Right. There it's really just one right now, which is MTL, Money Transmitter License Bonds, which hilariously enough are like a very simple, super simple, low risk bond. I feel like a lot of brokers and underwriters in the commercial space are incredibly familiar with money transmitter. So when we're talking about cryptocurrency today, they're like, man, what are they going to get into? It's actually not that complicated. Money transmitter is literally just people who establish money transfers. That's all it is. And we're talking about a different type of currency, obviously, but every bank is a money transmitter. All banks have to have these money transmitter bonds. If you drive by a Chase Bank or a Bank of America, every location they need to have a money transmitter license bond for each of those locations. Now, it's a little more complicated when you talk about cryptocurrency, because you don't have cryptocurrency banks, right? You can't drive down to the corner and establish your Bitcoin wallet at a bank. So the way that the MTL bonds work is a little outdated in relation to cryptocurrency, but they still work and they're still relevant because naturally the federal government and each state government wants to make sure that it's regulated in some way.
So it's a bond type that's been around for a while that we see in a lot of other spaces, and this is just how it's being applied in crypto.
Yeah, pretty much. And back to the sort of outdated spot. It's funny because if we get into this, like the state, it really comes down to state mandates. Each state is different. Some of them I feel do a lot better job of how they mandate through now the new crypto MTL regulations, and they're not new, so to speak. They're exactly the same as they used to be, but how they actually work with cryptocurrency and things like Bitcoin, because you may have, like Oregon, for instance, where I'm located, it's a $25,000 bond and it can go up to $150,000, but it only goes up based off of the amount of locations you have. And in cryptocurrency, there's no locations. Again, there's no banks. So, for Bank of America, for every location they have to have a bigger bond. But that doesn't count for Coinbase or, crypto.com or any of these traders because they don't have a physical location. So for, the state of Oregon, they just have that one minimum bond, and it doesn't really appropriately cover possibly the risk that they could have for the people who are trading in Oregon. Whereas states like Texas, for instance, the minimum is only 2,500, but it actually increases based off of the total volume that you trade, which I think is obviously much more appropriate because if you're trading through a volume metric, this is a much better way to actually cover the risk that is associated with what these exchanges are actually trying to do, which is making, or what the bond is trying to do is cover them for, fraudulent or non-honest transactions. So it's really interesting how I hope that these change over time. I hope more, because some states also don't have any at all. Like Rhode Island, for instance, just doesn't have any rules. You can just do whatever you want. It's kind of cowboy Wild West style, even though it's on the East. But my hope is it's actually regulated a little bit more because, one, bonds help everybody. We already know that. I don't have to convince you two of that, right? Bonds help everybody, right? And also, this is a very confusing spot for a lot of underwriters, and I feel like more regulation helps it easier to underwrite, which also makes it easier to get those bonds ultimately. So I think it's sort of there's a little bit of a cart before the horse, but more regulation ends up making it more standardized, which makes bonds an easier thing for everybody long term.
So, Stefan, have you seen states switch from location to volume in amending their statutes, or is that just not being considered?
Yeah, I haven't seen that. If the space is really small comparative to, it's a very esoteric sort of bespoke. There's not a huge amount of premium here because there's only so many trading platforms and they're only trading so much. So I would be surprised if something like that happened. I'd be very surprised. I obviously would love for it to happen, but until it becomes more commonplace, and you see even more of these companies like Coinbase trying to come up, which we do see them all the time. They're coming up, but it's a very weird competitive space, and it's obviously very volatile from just an asset standpoint. So it's not growing. We also have a huge crash. I mean, the whole everybody in the world basically had a huge crash, but that, doesn't separate Bitcoin and all these other digital currencies from also crashing, despite not being, them being decentralized doesn't help. They still follow supply and demand normal metrics there. So I don't see that happening anytime soon. I would love for it to happen. I think it would take maybe some lobbying by some of the bigger players, working with maybe a broker to try to get that standardization. But we'll see. That's a hard call to make.
Yeah, and I assume there's no model law that could be implemented or anything like that. As you said, it's probably too small.
Yeah, especially because it's a state-to-state basis, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if I went to Oregon and I said, "Hey, Texas has really got it right, man. We should follow them." Oregon's gonna be like, "What are you talking about? Like, we don't care. We're a different state. We've got our own rules. That's not important to us." So it would take a lot of money and funding and lobbying to really, in my eyes at least, get something like that to happen. And the premium dollars just in the space would have to be a lot larger for a lot of brokers and underwriters to care that much too, right? I'm a very small minority, right? Who can even talk about it.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah.
You mentioned that underwriters are sometimes uncomfortable in underwriting this type of bond. What is it beyond the volatility, obviously, but what is it beyond that makes this more complicated to underwrite?
Right. So, crypto, and when I say crypto companies, again, I mean ones like Coinbase, right? These are platforms that you can use to trade, whether it's an investment or you're using it as actual like physical money, which if people didn't know, you can literally use money. Like there's coffee shops around the world that you can pay in Bitcoin. I wouldn't recommend it because you're probably going to lose money pretty quick on it, but you could, like, it is still a currency as long as people accept it. It's a real currency in that.
Yeah, effect. I think we actually have a crypto ATM a couple blocks from the
NASBP really? That's
office.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
That's great. I love to hear that. So, I mean, they're kind of plagued by the same things that a lot of small new businesses are plagued. It's funny enough, back to this sort of MTL, money transmitter license thing, is it's not that unique to the space, and it's things we've already heard. So a lot of it being, these are new companies, brand new companies coming out. Some of them are funded by private equity. And anybody who's looked at financials where things are backed by venture capital, private equity, it can be abysmal, very hard to underwrite from a surety standpoint. Even if there's money there, just getting behind what is the business plan, when are you going to actually have net income? You've only been, a lot of these, they need to get the bonds before they can even draw new revenue, right? So how do you bond a company that doesn't have revenue yet and maybe only has capital in it? So there's a lot of items that underwriters who do write this risk, which there are very few, and when I say underwriters, I mean sureties, who do write this risk, the length of items that they need it's a laundry list, right? And going through the proper precautions, it's not just knowing what their business plan is, but do you have the proper insurance policies in place? Do you have cyber insurance? Like there's a lot of, because all of this is being transacted on your website. It's an incredibly important thing. Anti-money laundering and counterfeiting and all this stuff that normal businesses sometimes have to go through or don't have to go through. But it's just one thing after another for a new business. Just to get a $25,000 bond, it's a lot of work for an area that doesn't have a lot of premium in it. So you can see why a lot of underwriters don't want to do it. But back to your question, sort of the underwriters who are, I keep saying underwriters, I mean sureties. The sureties who do look at this risk, certainly Coinbase and all these bigger groups, they obviously have their bonds in place, and Coinbase is one of the longest existing ones. But where we've really found the struggle is that the funding historically has not come from the U.S. It's come from foreign groups. And so, when we get to the down the line of, okay, let's say you did have enough cash. We're not going to talk about income because that's already a problem. Sure, you're going to make boatloads of money 10 years from now, but who isn't, right? Anytime we're looking at anybody's business plan, they're like, hey, we're going to be rich in 10 years, right? That's the plan. So, okay, you got enough capital. We'll say that's good enough, but let's get to the indemnity part. Indemnification becomes a real big problem because now a lot of the times for most of these groups that I've seen personally, a lot of it is overseas. And especially lately, there's been a war going on and just a lot of things, and indemnity gets really rough. It's already hard enough because some sureties just only do certain countries, and then you add just global pandemic, global war, any sort of, or even just a hint of two countries not liking each other and that country being close to the two of them, right? That makes indemnity incredibly hard. Or, there's an incredibly wealthy personal owner, which I'm sure everybody's been in this situation, and they live in a country that doesn't necessarily have great foreign relations with the US. So there's a lot of stuff that sort of plagues this industry for trying to get new businesses off the ground and get them bonded that isn't just financial. And until we find more of these probably trying to be built within the US that makes the sureties more comfortable and they can actually have a few years, and maybe my expectation is you're going to see sort of splits where the managing group from one group, and this is already happening, the managing group from someone like Coinbase will go and try to create their own, right? They're like, hey, Coinbase is great, we know all of this stuff, how to do it, we're going to create our own. That happens with every industry. My expectation is that needs to happen within the US without sort of any foreign ownership for it to be a much easier sell. And there still has to be the money, but there's private equity always finds a way. So that's never been the problem. It's more this indemnity side on the end.
Well, I know that we had a virtual seminar recently on private equity. I'll include a link to that in the description for this. But indemnity in terms of private equity is pretty complicated anyway, regardless whether you're talking about cryptocurrency or another space.
Oh yeah. And it's funny enough, not to turn this into another private equity call, or podcast, but I mean, we're seeing it in every industry now. I see it. I do mostly healthcare, and the healthcare industry is just getting absolutely bought out by everyone, it's good and it's not good, but it's really interesting to see how it changes the space in any vertical, how we go from underwriting it one way to now, okay, well, everybody's has really strong balance sheets, but now the P&L is actually more important, which is funny from a surety perspective because it's usually not the case from a commercial side. We usually only care about the balance sheet, not only, but obviously a lot more weight is given. But now when it's private equity, we have to look at the P&L because we're like, well, we need you to make money. We don't want you to just be burning money every year. It's really interesting to see how this is going to proceed through the world, because also Bitcoin, or not just Bitcoin, but cryptocurrencies, they have these huge waivers of being incredibly popular. The Super Bowl, Coinbase had this really viral ad at the Super Bowl, and obviously all of the cryptocurrencies that were being traded shot up because people just knew about it, right? Again, and everybody already heard the word Bitcoin and probably Coinbase and blockchain, but just by getting, an average consumer on the website, all those things shot up, and then, different pandemic things happened, or, other people may have died, specific important people may have died, and they shot right back down. So this volatility is also really, I think, keeping a lot of people away. Sort of the initial fun of watching it hit like the crazy 60,000 per Bitcoins for some of them. And everybody's maybe heard of this, the GameStop holding called hodling, which is how they spelled it. They reversed the D and the L. All of this is sort of comes from the same type of trader who trades in the cryptocurrency world. And so everybody sees it as very volatile, and they don't really trust the traders who are doing it. So until that changes and you get more people like me who are using it as a long-term vehicle investment, and putting sizable amount of money in it, to get it to be more standard and stable, I'd be surprised if anything really changes. I mean, it'll still be volatile. It'll go up and down, but nobody has control over that, right?
Yeah. So volatility, indemnity challenges, business plans that, are looking way too much in the future and maybe more optimistic. So, but there's still some appetite, or is there any
absolutely.
appetite?
Yeah, there are. And it's funny, I always say underwriter when I mean surety. Obviously, we all know, we've all heard it. It's a relationship business, right? As a broker, I work with underwriters. I don't necessarily say I work with sureties. And that's why I just say that underwriter so much, because of my relationships with people I do business with. And so the appetite I found is more on the underwriter. So, the field underwriters who get out there, there's surprisingly been a lot of new faces, at least in my region. I mean, I work nationally, so I see people all over the place, but especially within the Pacific Northwest where I'm located, there's a lot of new faces, a lot of young blood in the space, which is great. Obviously, the surety industry always needs more people. And with the sort of new faces like my own is people who are trying to sort of combat this idea of, hey, we're in the risk space. Let's take some risk. I get the principle of suretyship. We're not trying to break that, but ultimately, if we can still abide by the principles of suretyship, let's roll up our sleeves and get some of this done. And that's sort of what I've been trying to do. And I'm working with some younger underwriters who got the gusto, right? They're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and got some extra time on their hands because they're not bogged down by a huge book. So the hope is that working with them, they'll always look at it and see, test what the home office underwriters at different sureties are willing to do. Because at some point it will change, right? Whether it's not going to be tomorrow, but whether it's tomorrow or 10 years from now, it will. So there always needs the people who are just trying, right? Every time something comes in, you just got to send it out and ask everyone. I think every surety needs to at least look at it, even if it's still a no, just to see where your appetite sits on a year-to-year basis. So it's hard, but it's not impossible by any means. I mean, sureties are still doing it. There's still plenty of these groups like Coinbase that exist who have bonds. It's been proven that they're fine. So it's by no means impossible. It's just, getting used to it and getting comfortable with it. Right.
But it's never going to be formulaic. It's going to case by case.
I mean, I wish it would be, but I don't ever see, as much as I wish I would love to say that the crypto industry is going to just, like the renewable energy industry has just skyrocketed over the last few years, especially within the surety space. And it's both impacting the contract and the commercial side, because it's just, there's so much, all the federal government here in the US and just across the world, people are huge about solar and renewable energy. And it's like, you can sort of say the same thing about cryptocurrency, but not on the same scale, right? And everybody knows it. Like you could say renewable energy and you could say cryptocurrency somehow in the same sentence. I don't know how you do that.
You just did it, Stefan.
You could say that and people would know what you're talking about for both, but one of them has, trillions and trillions of dollars invested in it, and the other is still a baby comparatively, right? And that's the biggest part, is cryptocurrency is still a baby, right? It's barely older than a decade. So, it'll have its time. I don't think it's anytime soon, but, I'm one of the people who will be sitting there waiting, asking every year, talking with underwriters, other brokers, people like you, saying, all right, is this the year? Is this the year that we take off and we do make it formulaic and strategic and make it easier for new businesses to come in? I hope so, because I'll be there when it does happen. That's for sure.
So are there, since we're a trade association, is there an actual trade association? There seems like there's a trade association for everything, but is there a trade association for cryptocurrency exchanges, cryptocurrencies, anything that would be a kind of regulating body, or at least to kind of normalize or make normative
There are.
practices?
I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I could Google it, but everybody who's listening could also Google it. So I'll let them Google it themselves. There are, certainly there are, large conventions that are associated with trading, and specific to each some of the more popular coins like Bitcoin. Right? There are conventions associated purely to Bitcoin and enthusiasts and traders of Bitcoin. And you saw this more common after the rise of things like NFTs, where that was a fad, obviously. And that's pretty much gone now. I don't think you can see it on almost any news. But yeah, there are associations. There's no, as far as I understand, the regulating authority is really like NMLS, right? The multi-state licensing, but it's not really, from a, they don't have a convention on cryptocurrency. They're just the ones that you actually go through to get your bonds at the end of the day. So, and even on a state-by-state basis, there's certainly nothing. So, but yeah, there's, I'm sure there's a Bitcoin convention. There's a trading convention for cryptocurrencies that all the enthusiasts go to, and I'm sure they look a lot like myself, under 50 and way too much time on their hands and wear glasses and never get out in front of their, never go outside and are only in front of a computer. But I would be, again, I'd be surprised if there'd be any sort of large lobbying that would happen to regulate anything anytime soon. I would love to look into it myself. That's something I'll probably do after this. And if there is, you'll find me probably on that board within a year. Or if I could be. I certainly don't know nearly as much as those people. I think I'm decently well versed, but some of the people, there's just so much to know. It's still so new and changing every day. It's so hard to keep track of what's going on. I also do things other than cryptocurrency, so but yeah, I'd be interested to see if something like that pops up soon here.
If someone listening is interested in getting more involved in the cryptocurrency space on the Surety side, just really wants to figure out how to build their comfort level in that area, what advice would you give them?
Right. So if you're a broker, call your underwriters, right? That's the first thing. I say that with, we've hired a lot of new people within my group. The first thing I always do is I tell people, talk to underwriters. If you're a broker, talk to underwriters. If you're a customer, someone like trying to start your own Coinbase, call a broker. I mean, do a little bit of research first. It certainly helps to know what you're talking about, but then call, any broker that certainly says that they specialize in cryptocurrency. That's a big help. Getting someone with a proper, sort of COO operating experience to operate a business like that will probably be the biggest hurdle. So I would say try to find someone like that first. There's maybe 5 COOs for large trading firms in the US, and they kind of like their whole job is just working for them and being paid more and more money every year to move from one to the other. And they kind of just switch because there's only 5 people who really know what they're doing, maybe 6. And I've met them all at this point. It's just, there needs to be, there's so few people who know what they're doing in this space. But yeah, if you're trying to make your own, call other businesses who've tried to do it too. You could probably get something going with a group like Coinbase. I don't think they're worried about competition. Chances are they'll just want to see how you develop a new platform and then buy you out, right? This is private equity. Everybody's got private equity venture capital funds. So they want to see you do it a new way so they can purchase you. Brokers like me just want to help you so we can actually help you exist as a business. That's all we are here for as brokers, is helping businesses operate better. And then if you're a broker, call underwriters. They're going to be the best. If you have an underwriter who doesn't know, research with them, go and get lunch and sit down and learn it. That's what I had to do. I wasn't, I literally just spent hours and hours in front of my computer researching it because it was interesting to me, obviously, but that's really the only way to learn it if you don't have someone who knows it yet, because it's just so new.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for being on with us, Stefan, and talking about cryptocurrency. Early on, you did mention the virtual seminar you did for us not too long ago, where we talked about keeping surety weird and some different types of spaces you can get into surety bonding. So if anyone wants to check that out, I will go ahead and put a link to that in the description as well. Hopefully we'll be able to have you back again sometime to talk about some more ways we can keep surety weird.
Sure. Yeah, I love that. I'm always looking for new crazy things. That's what gets me up every day. So yeah, I would love it.
You've been listening to Let's Get Surety, brought to you by the National Association of Surety Bond Producers. For more information about the NASBP and its members, visit nasbp.org.
Before we go, we just want to say thank you again to Old Republic Surety for their generous support in sponsoring this episode of Let's Get Surety. For more information on Old Republic Surety, visit www.orsurety.com.